we've talked about this in the past, but I'll just reiterate it real quick for people who are interested. If you want good quality on your film, don't bother with recording anything except the dialogue of the actors.
Yeah.
Get the microphone as close as possible. With a shotgun, like Joshua said, you want it above them as close as possible, not pointing at the top of their head. You want it pointing at their chest. You know what I mean? So it's above them, but out in front of them enough to point at their chest. You don't want it pointing at the top of their head or not, or at their forehead or something, because then it's going to be slightly muffled. That's a good way to get good, clean audio. All the sound effects, all of the music, everything except the actual speaking of the actors can be added later. You just really need to focus on getting that clean audio in camera of the actors. Another big thing is what we talked about already. If you're in direct sunlight, whether you're shooting day for night, unless it's an artistic choice, you need to have like a sheet, like a bed sheet or a couple to layer on top of each other that you can put up on a stand of some sort to block out the sun, or a big reflector to just shade your characters, because you will not believe how much quality you get out of your shots when you're going into color correcting. When you look at your actor's face and everything is like soft, nothing has harsh shadows, nothing is lit strangely, it's all soft, and you just get so much expression, you get so much cinematic look out of your actors when things are soft. And when you're shooting, when you're using the sun as a light source, like outside, and you're shooting through a blanket sheet or shooting through a reflector, it's like it's as if you have a cloudy day. By the way, if you have a cloudy day is predominantly the best way to film something, is because it's a natural shading mechanism, and it's going to make everything look so much more better. So definitely shade when you don't have to. If you're in the middle of a desert though, and your like scene is in the desert, maybe that harsh shadow is artistic. You know, maybe you're choosing that for a specific reason, but don't just default to that because you don't have access to something, because you can go take the white sheets off your bed and use that. And it'll look great. The other big recommendation I would have, besides a good editor that Joshua already recommended, is a thing called an ND filter. When you're shooting outside, a big thing is, you'll notice with aperture, and this is a little technical, but just try to stay with me. Aperture opens and closes to get better depth of field. The better depth of field you have, the more cinematic your shots are going to look, correct?
Yes.
It's going to look more like a movie. If you're shooting like with a DSLR or anything that has a lens that can get depth of field, which means one thing's in focus, things in front of you and behind you are out of focus, you usually want to get good depth of field unless you're choosing not to for an artistic reason. Because of that, if you're shooting outside, you're trying to get as much light into the camera as possible. So you want to open up that, or you want to close down because you have a lot of light from outside, right? So you want to close down. When you close down an aperture, it creates less depth of field. So you might have a shot where you're looking at someone and you want the background to be blurry, but you can't because you're shooting outside and there's so much light outside that you can't close it down enough to get good depth of field. Because aperture is the main thing that controls depth of field. But an ND filter is like a sunglass that you put over your lens to make everything darker. And if you do that outside, then you can open up. You can open up that aperture. It gives better depth of field. And although you're shooting in direct sunlight, or maybe sunlight but with shading your character, although you have all that, you're like sunglassing your shot, and so you can open it way up and get better depth of field even though there's a lot of light around you. So if you're wanting to make your film look very high quality and cinematic and Hollywood as much as possible, get good audio on set. Make sure when you're doing a trick of the camera, make sure, for the audience sake, make sure that you're doing it well, things are lit consistently, that it's believable. But then get like an ND filter on your camera for outside and make sure you're shading your characters, you know?